Good evening and welcome back to the Junius Maltby channel. Thanks for joining us once again. Tonight we have a special guest, Duane of Silver Shield. We're going to be discussing everything from silver, how he got started, the coin projects, the messages in them, and what it means, the environment that we exist in today, what's taking place around us. These are exciting times. So join me and Mrs. Maltby as we have this discussion with Duane.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us on our channel. We're nowhere nearly as big as yours, so we are certainly grateful that you set aside the time and the availability to do this mini interview with us. And just for our friends, our followers, our subscribers who are listening to this, whenever one of us speaks, you will see who is speaking just based on what is on the screen at the time. For you, Chris, I've selected the reverse of one of your rounds, and the GSM notation there is for Golden State Mint, and that's where you can all go take a look at the Silver Shield collection. And so, Chris, I was hoping that you could maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, about your collection, about what got you going, and if you have any other links that you would like to provide to us for our subscribers and followers who have not yet stumbled across your content, where might they go for that?
Thank you. My dad, who usually listens to all my interviews, say you don't mention Silver Shield enough in your thing. So I'm going to start off with that. As you guys know, I've designed a unique, independently designed silver coin series called Silver Shield. It's available exclusively over at goldenstatement.com under collections. Every week I come out with a brand. Um, this week I think it's the Taurus. If you guys have seen that, but that was released Thursday. It's a
Yes.
sacred geometry design, and those weekly designs are kind of like rare pieces of art that are available for 1 week only, and they're all whatever we sell is all we produce. So there's never any unsold inventory. There's never anybody who's looking to unload them and drop the value of them. And I think that's what's given Silver Shield coins a way of increasing value over time because of their relative rarity, and then obviously tied in together for this 10-year project that was started with the Silver Bullet Silver Shield manifesto I wrote back in February 25th of 2011. So now after almost 10 years of this idea of investors and people who are seeking freedom valuing silver above all else as a means of transferring wealth from this intangible global generational debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme planet bubble, whatever we're in now, into real tangible wealth. And on my channel on the YouTube, which is called The Greatest Truth Never Told, I've done close to 3,000 videos there, basically describing how we can essentially end all evil by upsetting the most biggest financial crime that's ever happened, which is the criminal manipulation of silver. And that would expose the weak underbelly of the entire banking system, and I believe would bring about a conscious evolution for humanity to walk away from all this debt, death, and deception that we've accepted as normal somehow.
That sounds wonderful.
Agree. And when I listen to something that you said, it's not an overnight thing, typically, or for the most part, for many of us to reach that conclusion or get to that level of thinking. And based on what I know about your background, it sounds like you have a similar background to many of us when it comes to kind of the initial American cookie cutter startup and life, enlistment in the military, family run business, and various instances like that that is quite relatable to a lot of people. And remember, a lot of us are titled conspiracy theorists, which is simply not true, and it's insulting in my opinion. And so when I listen to what you said, it brings me to something that I remember as being the moment where I first became awakened to all of this. And I was 14 when 9/11 happened, or I apologize, I was 10 when 9/11 happened, and I was 14 when I first started to question the narrative that was being pushed by the mainstream media and even many of those around me. And I recall this happening. I was listening to this punk rock album by a band that I really liked at the time, and I grew angry at the lyrical content, and I found myself researching it because, again, I grew up in this very patriotic home with a very patriotic background, and so I felt I was mad. I was mad at what they were saying, and then I started looking all of this up, and that's when my eyes were opened. So I'm curious, can you give us a little bit of background about kind of your coming to moment or what that was like for you?
Sure. 9/11 was definitely the uh, change for my life, but it really wasn't until my daughter was born in 2005, a couple of years later, that I really stopped thinking beyond myself. 2011, I was in the Marine Corps at the time. I was stationed over at Picatinny Arsenal in Dover. Our unit was the first unit activated after 9/11. And, because we were an infantry unit and so close to ground zero, so many of the guys that were in my unit, all had personal ties to what had happened down in at 9/11. Myself, I saw, the tower go down from Overlook Hospital, close to 20 miles away over in Summit, New Jersey. And then, with the activation, I was activated for a year. Thank God I didn't see any combat. Um, but that unalterably changed my life, because it was like, now something dramatic has happened out there, and anybody researching 9/11 can tell you that it was not whatever the official story was. World Trade Center 7 by far is the most screaming middle finger that there could ever be in
Absolutely.
the conspiracy world. And yet we didn't prosecute that. Nobody went to jail, got tucked under, and we've allowed these criminal cabal organizations that spread death, and deception, run over the United States. Now we have this election, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
and we don't even have the right to vote anymore.
Oh,
So
come on, Chris.
um,
They're just spreading freedom. They're spreading
yeah,
freedom and democracy, man. Don't you want freedom and
freedom
democracy?
masks.
Don't you want to send
Yes,
freedom to the Middle East? That's your job.
yeah, yes. So when I woke up, I understood the military aspect because I was in the Marine Corps. A quick read by War is a Racket by Major General Smedley Butler
Excellent
would
book.
convince
Excellent.
any soldier that this is a scam for the bankers, that all these wars are concocted to, improve corporate interests that own and control the country, and that our military men are just pawns in that. And unfortunately, I woke up to that, but I knew that there had to be something further than that, which would lead you to the creation of the Federal Reserve, Creature of Jekyll Island,
Yep.
which is a book you mentioned prior, that shows that, strip away all the politics, all the corporations, all the religions, all everything. Everybody bows to the almighty dollar. That is the one concurrent religion that all people bow to at the end of the day. And those who have the ability of creating unlimited amount of debt and death by creating money out of thin air, literally own the world plus about 5%. And that really blew my mind. I just couldn't believe that there was a privately owned bank that owned all the debt, that issued all the currency, that these were, generational bankers that have, done this in every country, and they essentially have owned the entire world. And now, you get to the logical conclusion. Well, what happens when you do own all the world, and there's no more lands to conquer? Um, and that's where I think we are in a unique period of history where there is no more debt. There's no more way of blowing this up any bigger without having a hyperinflation, without having some sort of massive consequences. And once the people feel the consequences of what is we've allowed, with all these debts and these psychopaths that we enable, and the degradation of our of our spiritual realms, our educational realms, our finance, our jobs, our values, all this other stuff, there's got to be a snapback. And I think when that snapback happens, silver is going to be by far the best asset to have,
Absolutely. It's
because
for
it's been,
sure.
yeah.
There's so much to discuss. I mean, obviously, based on your background, your beliefs, and the crossover and similarities to what I've believed and grew up with, and reading, and the materials that my viewers and your viewers all agree upon, we could have a 5-hour conversation. That's the thing. That's why these
Hmm.
channels, you can make 1,000 videos like yourself, and you
Hmm.
haven't even
Hmm.
scratched the surface. Recently, I've been trying to cover a lot of the coins throughout history to kind of paint that picture for people. Like, look, years ago, I did a video called Silver Money for 7,000 Years. Because, I mean, you're looking at like 70 centuries, 7,000 years, the entirety of human existence. We've
Mhm.
acknowledged and used silver and gold as money, sound money. And I've tried to show, look, these are drachmas, these are denarius, these are staters, and I've tried to take people through the course of how the dollar came into existence, how it was a specific weight, purity, and size of silver.
Mhm.
And I don't understand the disconnect with modern people. It's
Mhm.
so difficult to try to get the population to wake up to it and to see it. I'm sure you've seen like the Mark Dice video where he's trying to sell people an ounce of gold for $50 and there's no takers. Just it's unbelievable because you can't really get the. I want to know what that point is in which the entire population wakes up and realizes, hey, the dollar's worthless.
Yeah.
I've so often I've heard people say, "Oh, you can't eat silver, you can't eat gold." Well, you ever tried? You ever tried
Silver is
eating? Yeah. What's that?
silver has bought more food throughout all time in history and all across all languages. You could drop me anywhere throughout time and space in the last 7,000 years with an ounce of silver, and I'm getting my food. You can't
Absolutely.
really do that with any other asset. You can't do
No.
that with Apple stock. You can't do that with Bitcoin. You can't. I don't even know if you could do it with gold per se, but
A perfect
because
example.
it seems like you,
Well, the divisibility in gold would be difficult. Obviously, anywhere you went with if
yeah,
you had a
like
quarter, if you had a
you buy a
quarter
lot of
ounce of
food.
exactly, if you had a quarter, I mean, I think they both served an incredible purpose and role. A gold more of like a massive store of static wealth that you would convert into silver when you were trying to purchase goods and services, or for much larger, extensive purchases, like if you're buying or building a ship or a castle or a huge tract of land. But if you're acquiring goods and services on the street and the retail level, if you're going to market to buy like a hog. I've been using this example a lot lately because I covered British currency and the purchasing power of silver during like the 15th, 16th, and 17th century in England. And for a
Mhm.
long time, you're familiar with the denomination of a coin called the crown or the half crown, a crown being
Mhm.
about a silver dollar, a half crown about the size of a half of a silver dollar. There was
Mhm.
a long period of time there where a half a crown would purchase a whole hog, an entire pig worth of pork.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if you've ever priced out um, a hog today, a pork. I know people
No.
today, like my mother-in-law, she's a wonderful, beautiful Polish woman, and she's been
Mhm.
through hardship. She knows what the Soviets did. She's lived in a Cold War era country, and she stores food. And so one of the things she'll do is she'll buy a whole pig and have it butchered and put into a freezer to have her pork for, a year or two.
Mhm.
You can't buy a pig today for around it's like $300 or $400, right? So
Mhm.
imagine a half an ounce of silver buying $300 or $400 worth of pork. What does that equate to per ounce? You're talking about $600 or $800 an ounce silver for that to be
Mhm.
possible, and that existed in human time for a very long period.
Yes.
And you look at the strength, the purchasing power of silver. A denarius, for example, being a day's wages. Well, a denarius carries about a dime's worth of silver in size.
Mhm. Mhm.
About a tenth of an ounce or so. Again, a full day's worth of wages. If you translate into wages today, it's like you've said. And for years, I called people like yourself and others, silver maximalists. And I had this issue where I knew silver was undervalued. I knew
Mhm.
that it had much more significant purchasing power than we're seeing today. I knew it was suppressed. I knew it was manipulated. I've read the articles. Of course, even back when you and I were considered conspiracy theorists, we saw the spoofing scandal blow up with J.P. Morgan. I think they're still doing it. But I'm starting to realize more and more that yeah, I think there's something to what you people like yourself are trying to purvey to others is like silver is not only undervalued, it's massively historically undervalued. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm a silver only guy. I have been for 10 years, much to the chagrin of everyone out there. I feel the truth community, the silver community, the whatever the truth movement was, got hijacked by cryptocurrencies back in 2011, and they still have the hold over majority of the people. We started off this conversation talking about how most people don't even know what an ounce of silver is. They don't know what real money is. They certainly don't know history, and it's no wonder because we're not taught history. We're not taught psychology. We're not taught monetary policy. We're not taught, a lot of So what we're living with is a humanity completely ignorant of some basics of human nature and and economics, and that have profited off of this can do so so long as consequences are withheld from the people who are ignorant. And that's where I fear that we're coming to. We're getting to a point where they're not going to be able to hide the consequences of inflation, or the wealth concentration into the hands of probably the sickest people on earth. All these billionaires and trillionaires that continue to try to delude humanity with their illusions so that they can remain on top. The truth of the matter is, a tenth of an ounce of silver has always been throughout all time in history, up until recently. Maybe the past 100 years since the crime of, or since the foundation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, a tenth of an ounce of silver represented a day's worth of hard human labor throughout all time in history. It's in the Bible. They talk about people who work out in the vineyards would get paid a denarius, a tenth of an ounce of silver, for working outside. Um, in Sun Tzu's Art of War, there's a quote in there that you could buy 100,000 man Chinese army for 1,000 ounces a day. That's less than a tenth of an ounce of silver for Chinese soldiers with arms and everything. And you use the example of even back in England, a half an ounce of silver would buy you a whole pig. That would probably be worth $300 or $400. Um, these are all normal valuations of a time a long time ago. But one thing I would hazard to even say that that's a possibility, I think that those are even low now, because there's billions of more people out there and there's far more
Great point.
digital illusions out there,
Amazing.
right?
It's
And
an
I
amazing
think,
point. The population has increased dramatically. People say that, oh, will silver supply increase? Well, they lost
yeah,
a lot of it. You know that. Silver got
yeah,
destroyed. A lot of it was has been vaporized, lost, destroyed, or ground away by history. And there is now what are we coming up on? 8 billion people on the planet. And for the better part of human history, it was under a billion the whole time. So
yeah,
now we have to disperse that silver globally. And of course, goods and services have changed, and labor, and the economy is more complex and complicated. But the other thing I like to point out to people is, back then, silver didn't have as many industrial applications as we discover. I mean,
hmm
every year science and technology grows, and we're finding all of these different attributes that silver has as far as medicinal, medical. They knew back then it was bacteriostatic. You could put a coin in a gallon of milk and preserve it for a longer period of time. But there is now, we've got all these electrical applications, solar panels, defense, all kinds of systems that silver is used for. So you have this industrial demand competition, with the competition of it as being sound money and a store of wealth. And it's valued at what? I remember back in March, it hit 11. Are you kidding me? $11 for an ounce of fine silver. What,
mm,
for the better part of human history, for 2,000 years, no one had ever even held a coin that was as big as a 1 ounce 999 fine silver coin. They would have been blown away by it.
hmm
Can you imagine taking a large silver coin, one of yours,
hmm
3.9 fine silver, and showing that to an ancient person, anyone even in the Roman or Greek empires, and saying this? They would be blown away by the amount of wealth that would hold.
hmm
Yeah, it's incredible. It really is. It's exciting. I mean, I think you probably felt the same way. I think a lot of people do when they're younger. They're like, man, I live in the most boring part of history. What a boring time period. People are walking to 7-Eleven, playing video games, buying comic books. Life's just grinding on. And here we are at what could possibly be an incredible paradigm shift in human history, a return to sound money and an extinguishment of like central banks and fiat empire.
yeah. I think that everybody's kind of wanting to interview me again because of this Wall Street bets, GameStop thing that they've been doing. And people will say, well, if you can squeeze GameStop stock or AMC, why not silver? And so now that's been a buzz around there.
Yeah.
And what I would try to tell people is, number one, um, you can't you can't you can't, hold on one second, I should get kids here. You can't have a short run on silver the same way that you do with the stocks, because they can print unlimited amount of paper
ETF
of
paper.
silver out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a non-starter for me to say, hey, go long SLV or, take options in April for the, whatever contract in the
Yeah,
COMEX or
I
whatever.
hate paper metals. I
Yeah,
always say, if you
because
don't hold it, you don't
it's
own it.
that's right. So the only way, and it's the long way, is to grind it out and get as many people to buy physical silver. So I try to tell people, like,
Amen.
if you're gaming in, cryptos and these stocks, and you're making all these paper Ponzi profits, you're part of the problem until you cash out. Once you cash out into physical silver, then you start becoming part of the solution. So
Exactly.
yeah, so
And you know what's,
if
yeah.
these guys are going out there and kind of being active investors, and trying to bring some justice out there, measure your wealth in ounces. Don't say, oh, I'm up 15% or I'm up X amount of dollars. Measure your winnings in ounces, and I think that's when we actually turn the corner, because
Mhm.
then it takes the investor sentiment from measuring their wealth in digits, which can be printed up out of nowhere and won or lost 1,000 times over, into physical ounces that are off the table. And that's the thing I like about it, is when you buy physical silver, you've taken your wealth off the table, out of the government's hands, out of the banking hands, out of the regulators' hands, out of any of the stock manipulation or the press or whatever. It's out of the hands, and that's where we need it. We need the silver back in the hands of the people. This is why when the banksters demonetized silver in the crime of 1873, raped India of $45 trillion, got them off of silver, and even dynastic China, when two opium wars were about the silver trade imbalance that they had there, that's where they got the power. So the only natural solution is to get the silver back into the hands of the people. Unfortunately, we're dealing with a huge amount of ignorance and complacency, and not enough consequences yet. And I feel all it's going to take is a week or two, maybe a month, of the markets going crazy, where silver may not be able to be available, and banks, and all the stuff that we've seen going on in the background. It could happen very quickly, and that's when it's too late, too bad, type scenario. And that's why I've only been in physical silver, because I know that at the end of all these Ponzi stories and all this other stuff, all that's going to be left is silver. That's it. So I've been waiting patiently on this apocalyptic end of the Ponzi planet world, knowing that that's when it's going to mean the most. And that's when it's going to be the largest transference of wealth from all these intangible debt-based fiat Ponzi illusions into real tangible silver. So, whether that happens next week, next month, next year, next decade, I don't care. All I know is I got my money off the table, and I'm waiting for probably the largest transference of wealth that's ever happened.
And they
I
can't,
really,
yeah, I
and they
love
can't
it.
do anything about it.
No, they can't
It's a
touch it.
mathematical inevitability.
They
That's
can't
why they don't
touch your
talk to guys
silver.
like me.
They can't
Yeah.
touch your silver. It's off, like you said, it's off the table, out of their vaults. They can't manipulate it. They can't issue paper on it any longer. And
And as soon as we
I've
empty their
often,
vaults, they can't play the paper game anymore.
no, that's the
Because at
point.
some point, the major manufacturers are going to go, we have this futures contract for the June,
Can I,
silver delivery, and then there's no silver there. Then what happens when Apple, Google, Samsung, China, all these big companies go, we use this in all of our products, and now it's gone?
exactly. And here, real quick, there's so many things to cover. Like I said, we could talk about this for 5 hours. I often refer to it as an ideology of holding precious metals. For years, I've said, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. Buy the physical. I've given analogies about what it's like when you hold paper metals and you have like 5 or 6 people looking into a room and they all think they own that bar because they all have a coupon, a
Yep.
paper receipt that says they own it, and they just keep printing those off. And then you have the
Except it's
Federal
probably
Reserve.
100.
Yeah, you've got central banks like the Federal Reserve, and you've got Ben Bernanke telling Ron Paul, saying, when he asks him, well, why do you hold gold? Why do you hold it? And he's like, oh, it's tradition, tradition, I guess. Oh, BS. You think the central banks are holding 19% of of gold out of quote tradition? And because I think the two are, they go hand in hand. Sound money. When you look at like the Professor Ferdinand Lipp's book and his article and speeches on gold wars, and how when governments can print money, fiat, it makes it to where they can do these grotesque things like wage perpetual warfare. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you covered a lot of stuff in your last statement there about silver and the return, this wealth shift and what's taking place. And I can't agree with you more. It is happening. The one thing about this, putting the short squeeze on silver, I think you touched on it and agreed with it a little bit, in the fact that, look, if we are buying physical, because I think a lot of people are, and I've even seen on the Reddit boards, they're not just buying that, what I don't even remember the name of the mining company, but they're buying that. They're also buying the SLV, which, yeah, okay, that's paper, whatever. Let's get off that. But there's a tremendous amount of energy, and you're seeing it. It's percolating, man. It's boiling over, and it's showing up in comments and in the actual posts themselves, internet wide. People are ordering physical. Let me give you an awesome example that somebody sent me today from my channel, and I went and checked just to see. I was like, no way, this can't be real. This isn't true. So yesterday, we went on buyggoldandsilvercoins.com, BGASC, just to check out some stuff. And a lot of those sites, you can add, you'll put like 100,000 units in a cart. And then if you click checkout just to see what their inventory is, because they have like live inventory, it'll tell you.
And then you'll see like 7,000 units or something.
So I added yesterday, and I was doing a live talking about it. I added 100,000 2021 this year Silver Eagles, fresh off the mint, ready to ship today. I added them to the cart. It said, sorry, we only have 94,999 Silver Eagles in stock. Okay, 94,999. Remember that number. I did it this morning.
3 tons.
I did it this morning. The number is now 27,794, Chris. 27,000. That means last night and today, they sold like 70,000 silver ounces on one website. Gone. So it is happening. People are buying physical. We're doing it in the live that yesterday we had people gobbling up silver from website after website, hundreds and thousands of ounces being taken off the market, sent to people's homes with the idea of holding it for decades. It's a multi-decade bull run, as I call it. This isn't this year or next year. We're looking at a multi-decade change.
I think it's for the rest of humanity. I've been talking about the silver age of humanity, because I think once the cat is out of the bag, there's no going back. This is going to expose 143-year criminal manipulation by the banking empire, and it's not going to end until there's a massive revaluation of silver. And I've been taking issue even against people who stack gold, because to me that's the money of the banksters. That's what they measure their wealth in. They demonetized silver because they wanted to rise to the artificial value of gold. I don't even think gold should be worth 80, 100 or 60 times what silver is. There's far more gold above ground, an estimated 6 billion ounces of gold above ground in investable form, and then only an estimated 1 to 2 billion ounces of silver in investable form. And even that, I'm not even so sure that that's a real number.
I looked up the market cap of silver.
ETF.
Yes. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I've looked that up. I tried to cover that today. What the market cap of silver was at, like 1.44 trillion. And I'm curious where they even get that. I know. I'm wondering where 1.4, that'd be 1,400,000,000,000, but I don't even know where they're getting that from. Exactly. I mean, it could be, it's far less, but look at what they value the Dow at. They're saying the Dow's worth $30 trillion. And I don't agree with that.
There's no way silver. From what I understand, if there's 1 to 2 billion ounces, and I know there's more silver out there, but whatever it is, I've seen anywhere from 1 to 2 billion ounces in investable form. This is talking about coins and bars and stuff like that. I'm sure that there's a lot more silverware and stuff.
It is difficult to get a number on it.
If that's $25, then that's $50 billion market cap. Maybe all the silver in the world.
It's difficult to put a number on it.
2.4 trillion.
Yeah.
And gold isn't even valued at the proper, at its proper valuation. I mean, gold should be probably worth, $10,000 an ounce, relative to all the debt that's out there. I mean, they're spending, $3 or $4 trillion now in debt every year. So, and it's only going to get worse. And
the government only values, the U.S. government currently values silver. Do they still have a value that they place on? I know with gold, they value gold at $42 an ounce is the official United States government number, 42. But try to buy a gold eagle from the U.S. Mint for $42.50. See what they say.
Yeah.
I don't remember what they have it on silver. I thought there was a $1. It's $1 still, right?
Yeah.
According to their inventories of their strategic stockpiles and reserves.
Yeah. And I don't think the United States government really has much physical silver left in reserve. I don't think we have gold in Fort Knox. So there's going to be a big come to Jesus meeting at some point. And I think a lot of people are going to get caught blindsided, realizing that they don't have it. So, like
Like I
you
said, it's
said,
a
if you
game of
don't own it,
musical chairs. It's a game of
that's
musical
right.
chairs. And when the music stops,
It's
if
over
you,
forever.
in order to sit down and have a chair to still be playing, that chair is made of gold and silver. And if you don't
Hmm.
have a place to sit when the music stops, if you're just sitting with fiat, you're out.
Yep.
I mean, let's talk about that for 1 second, because I'm sure you've covered this in your readings and studies as well. If I'm not mistaken, the average lifespan of a fiat currency, an unbacked paper note issued at will, which is what fiat means, at the will of the
Hmm.
government, is like 30 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
It's like 30 years. And there's on the trash heap of human history, there's like 3,000 fiat paper notes, different ones that have been experimented, all of them again averaging like 30 years, and they just go extinct, and then nobody uses them anymore. We've seen what happened in Zimbabwe, the German, the Weimar Germany.
I'm a trillionaire in those countries.
Yeah, we have, yes. So here we're coming up on a very significant anniversary. I think it's April. There's a specific date in April when Nixon closed the gold window and the dollar became finally 100% unpegged, free floating against all other currencies. It's the reserve currency of the world. Bretton Woods was over, and that was in 1971. We're coming up
Yeah.
on the 50-year anniversary. And it's what I call it is a 50-year experiment. It's the 50-year experiment of a completely unbacked, empty promise note that's just printed at will, and people just believe in it, and they have to use it because of legal tender laws and such. To me, it seems like it's outlasted the average, and that its day of death and day of reckoning is coming. It's due.
You know what I find interesting though? They can print it at will, but if I print it in my basement, it's a no no. It's just not allowed.
Called
Exactly.
counterfeiting, that used to be punishable by death
Yes.
when we actually had some monetary laws.
And you know what else was
So,
punishable by death was people that worked at the Treasury that stole from the Treasury or diluted the strength of the currency by watering
currency,
it
that's
down
right.
or taking from the money. If you diluted gold or silver in the original U.S. Coinage Act of 1792, it was death by hanging.
Hmm.
And you would think that it seems like there'd be a lot of people that would have to hang if they still subscribed to those rules.
Yeah. Well, and see, we're all guilty of it because we've all played in this game. And I think it takes the conscious individual to say, hey, I may have been brought up in a world where, we were devoid of financial reality or basis in reality with having gold and silver as a basis. Because, when I awoke in, 2001, 2005, I was in the retail car business, and I realized, well, shit, no wonder we were making money because we were creating debt every day and making money off that debt.
Yeah.
And that's what our whole system is based off of. Those who create the most amount of debt, and get access to it first, are the ones that are making more profits, going forward. And we've now incentivized and enabled the worst in humanity to realize, oh, the way to make more money is to enslave your fellow neighbor with more debt. And the whole society is built off of that. And for me in 2005, I was like, well, I don't want to participate in that anymore, and I got out of the business. um, and spent a couple of years trying to figure out what to do. But when I got through all my studies, I was like, well, where does all this end? What happens when we just allow them to print unlimited amount of debt and everybody gets every money that they, at some point it becomes worth less. And when studying throughout history, you'll see that every time that they do this, it's a one-way trip. Like, there's no coming back to a strong dollar once you've opened up the gates to all this and
The
you
dollar's
know
dead. It's
yeah,
called it's the leper with the most fingers left. That's
yep.
the only reason it ever gains strength when there's a problem is the other countries run to it because they're forced to, because it's a world reserve
Yep.
currency. The day that ends, I mean, it's going to be one of those things where, again, people like they want the signs. They're like, you're not
More
going to know.
important than the moon landing,
Yeah,
Kennedy's assassination, people are going to know, where were you that day?
but no one's
Because
going to
that's,
tell you. That's the thing. You're not. It's not going to be one of those things that's like on the news, like
or to
tomorrow the
even look
dollar's over.
forward to it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like,
It's going to be like you woke
people
up
don't
in
even
the
know it's
morning.
coming.
Yeah.
Yep.
And look at the resets they've done in the past in other countries, 10 to 1, 6 to
Hmm.
1. Imagine waking up, all these people that have fiat in the bank. They have 100,000 bucks in a bank account. Overnight, there's a 10 to 1 reset. Now you have 10 grand of the new currency. Oh, and it purchases the same amount that the last one did. You just have less of it.
Yep.
Imagine that. Like,
Yep.
they vaporize wealth, they ruin people's lives. I did a story once on this channel years ago. It was, I don't remember the country, but it's a good little lesson in hyperinflation and such. Is this old man had saved all this cash, all this money. He'd stuffed a couch with it in his home. And I don't remember, I
Mm.
think it was Yugoslavia, if I remember, somewhere in the
Yeah,
Balkans.
they had a bad one.
Yeah. And he has his son and daughter-in-law over because they were having um, some problem financially. And he pulls this money out of the couch, says, "Hey, look what I got. I have all this money." And they said, "Dad, they don't use that note anymore. It's not worth anything.
Mm.
It's not worth anything." And imagine that it's just, to me, it's sad that they can do that to people, to elderly people.
Yeah. And again, it's all because of the Ponzi scheme that has gone on for multiple generations. And I think that this one I think is particularly ending. I don't know if Nixon or the 1913 when they founded the Federal Reserve. They took silver out of our coinage. They've unbacked the dollar with gold. We were on a petrodollar standard. I don't even know if that matters so much anymore.
Yeah.
But it's definitely now the global reserve currency. And what's the alternative? Communist China? Like, where else is
It's
the world going to run to?
control, man. They want
So
control and power, and that's what it is. The ability to issue currency gives them power and control over everything else.
over the short term, because I think it's once people realize that if that's the only magic trick that they have is to print money, and the money is going out to unproductive uses. I mean, paying off kids student loan things is not a productive use. That's not going to bring new jobs onto the market.
Oh, come on.
Any
Biden's
any
sending,
universal base
yeah,
any
whatever.
universal
Biden's going to
basic
send
income.
money, though. He's sending money to people. That's a good thing, right? Governments can
Yeah,
produce wealth, I thought, right?
yeah. So at some point the money trick ends, and where people go, "Oh, I don't want, you can send me all this money, but I need to have silver or something to save in, because it's not buying what it once did." And that's when it ends. So I don't know when or how or where, but I certainly like having more interest in the physical silver market, because whether the dollar dies and by default silver goes up in value, or we start triggering this stuff, because they can't hide this. They can't hide all these derivative contracts and stuff. I mean, there was a Bloomberg article that once said that they spend $5 trillion a year manipulating the paper silver market. And if we put the market cap of all the silver that's in the COMEX and the LBMA at maybe 10 billion dollars, that's a lot of leverage of $5 trillion to to hold over a $10 billion seemingly insignificant metals market that silver represents. But we all know that it is by far the most versatile commodity in the world, next to oil, with over 10,000 industrial uses, and all the new high tech, solar, electrification of the cars. You mentioned a bunch of the medical benefits of it. It's antibacterial, antiviral, anti-cancer properties. And then all the high tech. It's the most conductive, most reflective metal out there, and it's a depleting rare resource that we've pretty much mined out of existence. And we've had 143-year price manipulation. Sounds to me like a perfect commodity to
And
bring a lot of new investors to.
yes, and I mean the other thing, I mean, it's, I think, really important to get back to, in the roots of it, is let's ask ourselves the question, like, why did silver ever become money in the beginning, in the first place? I mean, think of the
Hmm.
attributes of money. Easily recognizable, divisible, malleable, transportable, easily recognizable. All of the things. It's a store of wealth in a smaller space. Because I don't want to give you a pig, Chris, but maybe
Hmm.
perhaps I can give you a coin, and then you can go buy something else with it that you might need. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and the word manipulation, it keeps coming up, and for good reason. And before we continue, there is something I want to remind everyone, that manipulation is not just of the currency. There are very evil people behind the scenes pulling the strings and managing the puppet show. And they've studied this extensively. They know exactly what it is that we are consuming, what movies we're interested in, how to get us through music, through art, through television, whatever it may be. They have studied this extensively. They're very adept at manipulation and making us feel powerless and filling us full of fear. That's what this whole last year has been about. But it's not just last year. I think it just feels more severe. But this is something that they have been fine tuning for decades and throughout much of history. And you could start talking about the Illuminati bloodlines and get more into the NWO side of things. But I think if you're on either one of our channels, you're likely attuned to the concept of manipulation also being that of mind control, not just currency.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great point because it ultimately is all about mind control. Whether you are thinking somebody else's thoughts and their values, or you're thinking your own thoughts and your own values. Everything that one of my most uh, uh, proud series that I did inside the Silver Shield is called the Pyramid of Power. And the very first one, it was basically 13 different levels of power that they used to control us. And the first one was we indoctrinate you, and it's the teacher basically telling you, do what you're told and don't
Oh,
ask
yes.
questions. And then the second one was we condemn you, with the basically church basically saying the same thing, like, we're the spokesperson for God and you have to listen to us. So all of this is about mind control ultimately. But one of the things I find fascinating is, yeah, it kind of gets scary on the levels of manipulation and money and uh, cunningness that goes into these campaigns to distract people into either wars or investing in certain things or voting for people. It's always about how do we manipulate the masses. And I found at the top of every power structure, they don't really create any new products. They don't create any new things. It's all about messaging, messaging to the people, their product, their vision, their this, their that. All they wanted is people paying attention to them. And I think as soon as people start to realize they only have power over you when you pay attention to them, they only have power over you when you use their money, they only have power over you when you invest in their stock, they only have power over you, when you do this. So I think the wonderful thing is no matter how multi-layered and how despotic or how the top-down manipulation from you know from daycare all the way up to college and then in the workforce, it's all about collectivism and going along and don't rock the boat type stuff. All it takes is one person one day to wake up and go, oh, oh, that was wrong, and they'll never be fooled again. Like your people who listen to your channel, people that listen to my channel, once they've woken up and realized, oh, that's a game, that's a thing, oh, that's how they get in power, they're immune to it forever. So I like to think like all the stuff that I've been doing, on the greatest truth never told, and then even the silver shield coins are ways of, I hope that individuals reach out and see something like this and go, oh, I never thought of it that way, and they'll never go back to going, oh, I'm going to go listen to Jim Cramer on CNBC on what my next investment is. No, maybe I should actually pick up a history book and start looking at Weimar Republic in Germany to see what happened with their hyperinflation between world wars, and how an ounce of silver could have bought up a whole block of apartment buildings, and massive changes. There was another great book called The Great Wave, going through all the price things, and it's basically every 80 years or so that there's a major cataclysm that hits societies, and of course it's going to have to do with the monetary system and stuff, and we're due for another one, folks. So yeah, you said we were brought up during a very boring time, and I've felt that same thing. But now that I look at our unique position in history, and seeing that this is all going to end on a global level, this isn't going to be an insular, one country like Germany or one country like Venezuela. Everybody's going to do that, and I
That's
know that
yeah.
there's very few seats left for people to store their wealth. And so I'm just waiting at silver and silver shield and seeing where it goes.
It's going to be a globally broadcast misery at a scale that we've never seen. At a scale never seen before. Because like you just mentioned, it used to be isolated. It was this country. It was this country, maybe. I'd say the Great Depression probably affected more of the world than at other times. It was probably the first time that kind of hit a lot of countries rippling around. But this
Yeah.
time, it's going to be so massive, the scale of it. It's actually staggering,
Amazing.
bigger than we've ever seen before. And
Yeah, and that's a scary thing because I don't think enough people have even contemplated the possibility of it, much less it actually happening and people getting caught short.
mhm.
So I don't see anybody in any position of power who has been warning about that, much less preparing for it, much less making a common sense thing. I have seen a couple states, um,
Yeah.
like Utah and South Carolina, that have passed, pro gold and silver laws to encourage people to own gold and silver. And my hope is that when this does happen, the federal government is going to be looking like complete inept. Their money is not going to be worth much. They're probably going to want a lot of power from the states, and my hope is that there's going to be local state governments who recognize their own independence from the federal government that has lurched over this country, and start establishing gold and silver as a local currency for the states. And I think that that'll be the next level for me. For right now, I think all the individual investors should be investing in physical silver as a means of transferring their wealth from the intangible debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme paradigm that we currently live in into whatever comes next, which is going to be based off of, real tangible values. But then, the next move would probably be, well, where do we all go? What states are going to be the most pro silver and gold states? Because if states can then lure active silver investors into their states to start building conscious communities, which is what I want to do next, so that we don't need Amazon, and we don't need Tesla, and we don't need Microsoft, and we don't need Berkshire Hathaway, and we don't need JP Morgan. We just start building local communities that clothes, heat, heat, water, food, and bring back kind of like a small town America. That's what I'm excited for. It's not, for me, it's not like, oh, Chris is going to be a gazillionaire one day because the dollar goes to death, and and he'll have a lot of purchasing power with the silver. It's like, what then do we do so we don't end up being like, the criminal oligarchs right now shooting rocket dicks off to Mars?
Exactly. So I agree with you there on that. It's not about becoming billionaires out of this or trillionaires or anything. We're trying to make a better world, a safer, more equitable world. Even that's what people don't realize. Everyone talks about equality and wealth distribution and this and that. These people created the guys in Washington and Congress, and the banks that back them, the financial entities, Wall Street. They pretend to want this equality when they're the architects of the very prison that is creating this wealth inequality and ruining the lives of people in the lower incomes. Because as well as I do, that inflation, it hurts those on Social Security, fixed incomes, pensions, the lowest economic echelons of an economy. They're the worst affected. The people closest to the spigot, the elites, the bankers that get the money first off the tap and hot off the press, they get to spend it into circulation first. By the time it gets to the little people, prices have gone up and it ruins their lives.
Yep.
And here's the thing. You mentioned a lot of good points there, but like the politicians and the people that we're talking about, they don't know, man. It's so evident that how many people do you talk to? And I'm sure you do, that have the same run-ins that I do, that they have no concept of a dollar collapse or that it could happen or if it's possible. They're so, I guess, indoctrinated or so into this. They have this mindset, this normalcy bias, where because they've never experienced it and no one, that it can't happen. Oh, their brain's telling them like, oh, I've never seen a currency collapse, therefore it's not a possibility.
Well, Junius, the puppets don't control the strings, it's the puppet masters. And as is very evident here, these are very skilled puppet masters.
Yeah. And well, I don't even them. Yeah. Cause I think it's people above Congress. Cause I've talked to congressmen, I've talked to governors. I've actually spoke with one on the phone a couple of times, and I've had, those interactions, and I've tried to bring up these issues. And I talked to a guy who was a congressman and a governor, and he's held different offices. This guy had no idea, Chris, about anything, any of the history that we talk about, monetary policy. I asked him if he had any concept of just in conversation, I asked him about Hepburn versus Griswold in the Supreme Court cases where, the U.S. government essentially created the legal tender laws and forced their way into private contract dealings. And no clue, never heard of any of it. No idea what the ramifications of those things were, how it affected you and me and currencies going forward. They just don't know. Even the people at the highest offices have no idea.
It's not that he didn't know, or perhaps as you mentioned, he didn't. It's the fact that when he was informed, he did not care.
He just blew it off like, oh, that's interesting. Thanks. That was interesting. I'm glad I learned that fact in case it ever comes up on Jeopardy next. And they just move on. But it's like, no, dude, do you realize I'm talking to you like the currency's going to die. There's something wrong here. We got to fix the problem. You're trying to push, like my channel is, and all the other metals channels, a lot of them out there that are kind of preaching the same thing, is we need to just buy it, buy physical, hold it, don't capitulate. My thing is, I keep telling people lately, look, if you're going to earn $5 or $10 in fiat trash paper profit per ounce and you sell your silver for that, you're not doing anything. You got to look
Mm,
at the end goal. Look at the goal here. What are we trying to do? We're trying to break the system. We're trying to expose the lie of the dollar and kill it finally, destroy the fiat empire, fractional reserve bankers, destroy JP Morgan, destroy Wall Street. And the only way you're going to do that is if you buy and take all of the silver off the market, you refuse to sell it when they want to buy it off of you for even $100 an ounce. No, I'm not
mhm.
giving it to you. You can't have it. It's not yours to buy. It's not for sale. And then break the system and start over.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I see that, I almost see it as like all we're doing is just, valuing it that the founding fathers did. 371.25 grains of, fine grain silver was the definite definition of a dollar for a long time.
Absolutely.
The silver defined the dollar. So I'm only stacking silver, and I'm only measuring it and valuing it as an ounce. And I think that's the key.
That's
Like
the
as soon
key.
as as
Yeah.
soon as soon as people measure their wealth in ounces and taking the dollar equation out, like as much that's the mind trick. Like your wife mentioned before that this is all mind control. The dollar is mind control.
Yep.
It's an illusion that they go, but will you sell your soul for this? How about this dollar sign?
Yep.
How about a lot of dollar signs with more decimals to it? Like
Right.
it's all an illusion, and they can create unlimited amount of it. So that's why they're able to buy off politicians and Supreme Court justices and wars, and nobody ever goes to jail because there's no consequences because everybody gets bought off.
No
I
one's
mean, there's
using, and
more
like you
than
said, no one's using dollars today. There's no dollars
mm,
around. They're using
mm,
Federal Reserve notes.
yeah,
There's not a
yeah.
dollar.
And
Like you
so
said
the
it.
only way to win is to not play the game. Like, and I laugh at all these people doing these Wall Street bets, pumping up GameStop stocks. Like, I mean, come on. Like, if you guys want to get serious about this, the only way out is to measure your wealth in physical silver, to take physical possession of it and become, what a normal person did back 100 years ago. You actually saved your wealth and were responsible for it, and you measured your wealth in it. And the very fact that you own physical ounces of silver is a natural way of stopping you from spending money on stuff that you don't really need. You start revaluing everything you do
Oh
and
yeah,
buy relative to
exactly.
silver. All of a
I would.
sudden, like
Oh,
you
go
don't
ahead,
want to
sir.
buy a pizza because it costs an ounce of silver. You're like, like
Exactly.
you
That's a
start it
very
start
strong.
changes everything about that.
Yep. And I know exactly that mindset you're talking about. When you start looking at what something costs in metal, you're like, no, I don't think I would give them an ounce of silver for that.
Hmm.
You start realizing quickly, like, that's not worth it. That's not worth that. Yeah.
I think the thing to take from the GameStop situation is that there was seeds being planted that while it was not done through precious metals, that this generation of kids, um, and I would say it was millennials and Zoomers for the most part who took place in that it was the concept that they all wanted to come together and upset Wall Street. And I would consider it a small victory only due to the seed being planted and the proof that it can be done if you get enough people on board. And that's what I hope will happen with the silver and the precious metals.
One of our viewers put it really well yesterday in talking about this and said it's more of a proof of concept, because I agree. The game's it's silly in the fact that ultimately someone's going to get burned.
Hmm.
There's people that bought GameStop probably at $400, and if they're in that position 6 weeks from now, they're probably going to get burned because it's overvalued.
Hmm.
We know that, and
Hmm.
ultimately someone's going to buy at a level that they're not going to be able to sell it to somebody else at. You know what that's like. You've heard it. It's the same thing with, like, for example, like some people talk about with Bitcoin. One day someone's going to buy Bitcoin at a value that the next guy is not going to want to buy it for.
Yep.
And even I'd say in gold. Like, if you told me if you had $40,000 or $50,000 worth of gold on a table, or a keychain on a USB drive, and you said, okay, you can have these 25 ounces of gold that are sitting on this counter, or you can have the code that's in that USB drive. I'm taking the 25 ounces of gold or
Mhm.
the 5,000 ounces of silver or whatever. On the other, I'm taking the metal off the table over the keychain USB thumb drive that might have some code on it that represents a digital token of some kind. And I think that's, I don't think you're ever going to be able to stray from that deep in people's psychology. I mean, you're not going to disrupt 7,000 years of human psychology and the attributes of money and all of these things for, I mean, I've pointed out the weaknesses in crypto for years. I have messed around with it and discussed it at length at times, but ultimately my whole goal with it would ever be, I'm going to exit that position of whatever it is and land in gold and silver and take up a sound money position to the end. That's the ultimate goal always. And I think a lot of people have that goal.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is, having physical silver is also a way of transferring wealth into whatever the next paradigm we decide to create. So once you realize that all the power that currently exists right now, the politicians, the CEOs, the popes, the presidents, all these people are all built off of their ability of controlling a Ponzi scheme of some sort, whether they're a corporation, whether they're government, whether they're whatever church or whatever they are. They're all in control of some sort of a Ponzi scheme. And once the dollar collapses, all the Ponzi schemes are going to go, and all the people in power are going to go because they're the ones that everybody's going to go, hey, wait a minute, what happened to our Ponzi scheme? Why can't we have something for nothing forever? And then those people are going to be held accountable for it, while the big bankers behind the scenes go, oh no, they're on to us. And the only places that you're going to be able to put your wealth into at the end of the day, if the dollar goes, it's not going to be bonds, not going to be stocks, not going to be real estate. Might be gold, but I think it's ultimately going to be physical silver. And I think silver is going to be worth as much, if not more, than an ounce of gold, because gold is intrinsically useless. It doesn't really do anything other than being gaudy Goldman jewelry. Um, and there's an estimated 6 billion ounces of gold above ground relative to the 1 to 2 billion ounces of silver that is vitally needed for all the corporations out there and on whatever next wave of technology is. But I think that bringing on my point of which states are going to make gold and silver legal, you have to realize if you do own physical silver and you have a bunch of friends that own physical silver, guess what, folks? You now have the real capital it would take to create new silver banks that are going to be needed to start building whatever the next paradigm is going to look like. And I have a feeling it's not going to look like strip mall, consumeristic China, uh, cheap plastic Chinese thing, America. We need to revitalize America back into a more sustainable way of living. And I think small town America is going to absolutely need silver as the backbone towards whatever that ends up being. So I try to get people not to think just about in dollar terms, like, Chris, what's your dollar price target of silver, for
Exactly.
2021? Like, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
but if you can tell me an ounce of silver is going to buy an acre of land, that makes me think a lot more. And if you realize that there's about 8 billion acres of arable land in the world, and again, 1 to 2 billion ounces of silver, that's only a quarter ounce of silver for every acre of land out there. That's how rare this stuff is, and yet we're treating it like it's nothing.
Yeah, it's mind blowing actually. When I don't think of that often enough. The equation of silver to land, and especially on a historical level, what it used to represent.
Or even to
Um,
the 7 billion people out there. I mean,
oh
what is
yeah,
that? Like a tenth of an ounce of silver, if equally distributed? Well,
yeah.
I got
Most
news
people
for you,
don't. I
folks.
mean,
There's a
yeah,
lot of people who own tons of silver, and so it's not going to be equally distributed. So it's even less than a tenth of an ounce of silver. So that's
exactly.
why, like, for Americans not to buy physical silver, even a couple ounces, because I don't think it really would take much for you to live like a king on the other side. Maybe 1,000 ounces, maybe 100 ounces. I don't know. 100 ounces of silver would represent 1,000 days of hard human labor if you valued it at a tenth of an ounce of silver. That's a hell of a buffer. But if you could have 1,000 ounces of silver at 10,000 days, that's 30 years of buffer.
And
You can.
yes, when you look around you, and like I tell people this a lot, when you're in traffic, when you're in a store, most of those people you see, 99% of them have never probably even held a silver coin.
Mhm.
Most, and you look at a packed highway on a morning commute somewhere in a big city, none of those people have silver, most likely. And if they were to convert even 10% of perhaps their 401k or their savings, if imagine that, there's not enough. It wouldn't work.
No. Mm-mm.
And I've told, and that's another point that I've used oftentimes is when the price moves in that direction towards its more accurate end. And I agree with you. I don't believe it's not a dollar cent. It's okay, how many ounces do you have?
Mm.
But the conversion process of exiting a fiat position and your dollar exposure to take up silver exposure and to find yourself with physical silver, there's going to come a day where that door is closed. No amount, no amount of fiat will be able to get you any amount of silver, and no one
Hmm.
who has silver will sell it to you, and you're
Hmm.
done. You're out in the cold. You have a wheelbarrow full of cash, and nobody wants it. And that's it. That's it. The game over. There's no moving from that point anymore. It's you've reached the last space on the game board, and you're out of the game.
And it's generationally. That's the thing. Like, I don't know if you've seen Gone with the Wind, but Katie Scarlett O'Hara's father, he was a Southern plantation owner, and when time came due to pay taxes, the Northerners only wanted their taxes paid in gold. And the father, all he had was Confederate bonds that were worthless, and he literally drove himself mad. This was a man who was, you know, probably doing very well in one paradigm, and when the paradigm ends, and he didn't transfer his wealth into the next paradigm with gold and silver, he lost his mind. And I shudder to think of the egos that are attached to their careers, their investments, their jobs, their retirement accounts, the relationships that they had and stuff that they may have sold for dollars, and then to have all that go away.
I think it's going to be devastating. The psychological and emotional toll that you'll see at the end of this, because yes, there's a lot of it comes down to, like we talked about earlier. You
And it's
mentioned,
completely avoidable.
yeah, a
That's the
lot. There's
crazy thing. It's
a
completely
lot of pride.
avoidable. Just deal with
Absolutely,
it now.
yes, but a lot of, again, and two things. I think a lot of it's pride. It's a lot of it is pride. I mean, I've had people tell me that nothing
I
will
think
happen.
arrogance is a better word.
Exact arrogance. You're right. And
They're
that's a
more
way to put it.
arrogant about their
I've had
stupidity.
people arrogantly tell me that there's
Yeah,
nothing that could affect them when it
yeah.
comes to this economic situation.
Oh yeah, they're immune.
They're immune to this. And I've also, aside from that, not only is it the arrogance part of things, I think there's also a population out there that doesn't want to acknowledge. Maybe they believe it a little bit, or they kind of think, okay, there might be
They're
something
afraid.
to what Junius and Chris is saying. But here's the thing. They don't want to admit it because they know the next step is they're going to have to make very difficult decisions, and might accept a reality that they're uncomfortable with. Like,
The bubble is safer.
it's safer to be in the
Yep.
Matrix and not wake up. Like that
Yep.
scene in the Matrix where the guy just says, look, I
The
want to stay in the
steak.
Matrix. I want to have my steak. I want to have everything appear as if it's fine. I don't want to wake up. I don't want to live out of this because it's just an ugly reality.
Hmm.
And I think
And
a lot of people,
that's where they lose.
yeah,
Every one of those people will lose 9 times out of 10 because you cannot sell your soul. You cannot sell your integrity. You cannot, if you start accepting little lies, you're gonna go down the slippery path, and you'll get eaten up. So yeah, anybody who has sold their soul or their stuff, relationships, their careers, time for dollars, and think that they somehow are going to get to the other side of this collapse, is fooling themselves in the most tragic way. But I've been in this educational sphere for 10 years. I've tried 3,000 different ways with all the videos I did on the greatest truth never told to try to, backflip and get people to see things different ways. Ultimately, at the end of the day, people need to wake themselves up. They're the only ones that are going to free their minds. When the student is ready, the teachers are always around. I mean, guys like me and you and David Morgan and, SGT Report and all these other guys that talk about silver, we've been out here a long time, but everybody else keeps getting distracted by, oh, Trump's going to save us. Oh, Bitcoin's going to save us. Oh, GameStop's going to save us. Oh, like nobody's coming to save you. I think the only way that everybody, and this is the other kind of cool thing I like about silver stacking, by us valuing silver higher, we're enabling, in my mind, the best people in the world to make their stacks worth more. So if silver goes up to 30, all of the best people that I know in the world, they're all of a sudden have become worth a lot more in dollar terms. But it also starts pushing the movement of, oh, we can self-fund by just making silver worth more and expose the criminal banking that has held the silver down. Once that pops over, and I think $51 is the magic number that I've been waiting for. Once we get over $51, the attention globally, because you have to remember back in the 80s when the Hunt brothers made a run at this, it was really just the United States and maybe England that was involved in the global silver market. That was it. Now we got, $25 trillion a year, China and Saudi Arabia and Russia and all these other major countries out there. They know that the dollar is going to die. And maybe have bought some gold, but when they realize that their corporations and their militaries are going to need physical silver, that's when it's going to become worth a lot more. We're worried about China's rare earths. I think people should be more concerned about silver because it's so prevalent and found in everything, and it's been criminally manipulated for a long time. So the price discovery really hasn't happened. And I think all the wise investors out there who have gone out there and picked up all these ounces that they keep throwing on the streets for nothing. Remember that in the back of the Bible? You're going to throw gold and silver out in the streets.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing, folks. They're giving it to us for free. They're paying top premium for GameStop and cryptos and sneakers and whatever collections that are going on out there, and they're literally throwing silver away for nothing. And all we have to do is just go pick it up until they have no more to give. Then the game's over forever. We own all this silver. Guess what? We own all the silver.
Take it off the market. And it's pretty incredible today what's taking place on it. I mean, silver is just 2 days in a row up, and I know it might not have to do with much with what we're doing, but I am seeing physical demand. It is flying off the shelves from dealers, and I mean, silver's up 5% both days, 10% total, almost to 2703 right now. There is movement taking place, and I think, and they say that any Uh, what is that saying? Any press is good press, or the whole business adage. I don't know what
No news is bad
any
news.
any publicity is good publicity, I guess is the words. Um,
Mhm.
I think silver is getting publicity right now. I like your idea about the 51. I think it's going to happen as well. I mean, it's getting publicity alone right now just because of this Wall Street bets situation. And there are, like I said, there are guys buying physical. I know all of the viewers
Mhm.
on my channel did. I myself did. Um, there's some shaking and shifting taking place. This is the shaking and the shifting, man. It's the separating the wheat from the chaff in a way, to borrow that parable. It's happening a little bit. I think it's slow at first. I think it's going to accelerate. I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see the tempo increase, Chris. I think you're going to start hearing it more, seeing it more, and it's going to start paying dividends for you. You're going to start, like you said earlier, people are asking you to come on. And the coincidence for this is like that's not the reason I even wanted to have you on today. Is we just um, I've been stacking for years. My wife found your coins, and she just loved the way she first found it. Is she likes the coins with skulls on them and things. And
Yeah.
once she saw yours with all the messages at the same time, she's like, "Wait a second, these coins have a lot of the things we talk about and believe and read on them." And I feel bad because I'm sure I saw your stuff in the past. It
Yeah.
was just I don't know if it was busy timing. I didn't mean to pass over them or whatever, but
I
it
don't
was
take offense. I mean, we all have lives.
If you could see my eBay watching list for the ones that I've missed.
it's one of the reasons is some of your coins are only 800 or 900 pieces, and it's like, wow,
I know.
that's not very many. Like that's going to be hard
No,
to find.
but do you see the genius in that, man? So
Yeah.
by doing that, I've created a collection. I've known where this is all going to end up. I knew at some point silver was going to be the most desirable asset out there. These collections were going to be the most important collections out there because for 10 years I've been, coming up on 10 years. I put out all these rare limited editions. Now I could have just done Freedom Girl and just run with Freedom Girl forever, right?
Yeah.
But I really pushed to have these coins encoded with special messages. Like, I mean, that's how the Egyptians passed knowledge down, was they etched it in stone. Well, I kind of took what the Egyptians did and I etched it and encased all this knowledge and basically magic into these coins that they're now pieces of information that are offline. So think about it right now in this age of Twitter censorship and all this other stuff. All these coins are offline. They're encased and encoded with all this with knowledge, much in the same way ancient civilizations used to pass on knowledge and etching it in the stone. I put it into precious metal, and it's in the form of silver that's going to benefit from the collapse of the global generational debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme. It's like I don't know how many things I could put in together into this one series, but it's significant. And until silver does what I say it's going to do, this is all flying below the radar. So your wife buying all this stuff on eBay, and paying premiums now. Wait until the world wakes up and everybody's going to want the Rolex of silver. There's no
Absolutely.
other brand out there.
Yeah.
Are they going to go run for the Queen of England silver after this fails, or the Silver Eagle, after the United States government finally shoots its final load of dollars all over the world? No, people are going to probably melt those to wanted to have the Silver Shield version, because we were the ones for 10 years that were saying, hey, this is coming. And we're going
Right.
to educate you, and we're going to prepare you. And guess what? You got the token too to prove that you were, ahead of the curve. So
I absolutely
that
love the idea of putting messages on coinage.
Well, we talked about that the other day, Junius. Remember when I said how hilarious it would be if one of the three-letter boys just kind of busted into our house and tried to take all our things, and some of that being the silver? And when they open the chest, these are the rounds that they see, the Silver Shield rounds with the messages on them.
It's the ultimate slap in the face. It's basically they confiscate a coin and then they look at it and they realize they
like,
are
oh,
the
I'm that
evil
guy.
power that the coin's talking about.
Right.
The other thing is it transfers that message, like you said, Chris, for the future generations forever. When you're gone, because silver, like we both know, it's valuable throughout human history for 7,000 years. If you buried a collection of Silver Shield coins right now and they were secured, and then in 500 years or 1,000 years, if this is all still going on, which I don't know about that, but if they dug it up and they found all your coins, historians, archaeologists, people would be able to translate exactly what's going on and what you were talking about and the messages you were trying to translate. And it would be, you had sent a message like a time capsule throughout human history, as well as wealth. I talk about that a lot with precious metals. Silver's like kinetic wealth, like it's a store of labor. And when you store your labor into that coin, you can unleash it at a future date. But the same with the messages that you put on them.
It's a great Orwellian concept.
It's beautiful.
Offline though, that's the thing I really like about it. And I feel like I've been painting this picture for 10 years. I got 2.5 million ounces of Silver Shield that we sold over those 10 years.
Beautiful.
I don't know, there's maybe four or 500 different designs and strikes out there. So it's not just one coin, one Silver Shield. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And like your wife said, future generations are going to see this. Thousands of years from now, these Silver Shield coins will be around, and people are going to know the rest of the history about how this all played out, how the whole world got drunk on digital illusion of wealth and central banking and monetary policies and all this other bullshit. And at the end of the day, it all came down. And guess what? Here's this unique little series that, like you said, I only do like 800, 900 ounces a week, of the proof coins. So the mintages are really low. And then once you realize that maybe there's only like 200 guys that are actually like buying those 900, it's such a teeny community. Like it would take I mean, can you imagine if one like Joe Rogan or, some guy actually like promoted Silver Shield? There's none out there. Like, first of all, I think all my sellers would immediately be like, I'm not selling. Joe Rogan just said Silver Shield. Like, no price is going to be high enough for me. But then it becomes like the unattainable thing to get, that it's the best one to have of all the silver out there. Yeah, you can have, other ounces of silver out there, but is it the one that, helped bring down the paradigm, that laid out the silver bullet, Silver Shield, that, put out this idea that, if we break the underbelly of the banking system, that we can bring individual freedom and, reawaken humanity and all that stuff? No.
Well, I like the idea of not buying it from a government mint. And really, I despise owning anything that has the queen on it.
So I did a bunch of slave queens, against the Queen of England, because, on one hand, she's one of my biggest competitors. They got the Royal Canadian Mint, they got the Perth Mint, they got the, whatever the UK Mint is, and she's on the back of all of them. So, wouldn't be much of a competitor of me if I didn't throw a couple black eyes at her. And then, the same thing with the United States Mint. I just did, Warbird and, a couple other designs mocking the Silver Eagle design that, it's the same design that they've had for 40 some odd years. But that's one of the other things. We're a private solution. So I got sick of stacking government silver. I was like, here I am all upset about the government spending money and wars and the elections and all this other stuff. And then what do we have to do? We go buy from the Treasury or go buy from the Queen of England. Like, that was basically the only two options out there. You know, and yeah, I know there's other private minted, you know, like buffaloes and stuff like that, but I wanted to create something completely unique and that I wanted to stack. So I've eventually transferred all my, I used to only stack 100-ounce bars, constitutional silver, and silver eagles. I still have my constitutional silver, but I basically traded or melted all my bars and or sold my eagles to get silver shield ones, because now that they're way more rare, and much more interesting. So now I have a silver shield stack that is, you know, something that you really want to show off. Well, you know, hundreds of different designs and stuff like that. Whereas I think most silver stackers don't really have a stack that's, I don't know, much to be shown. You know, how many eagles can you show? You know,
Yeah,
to somebody go, wow, look at
it gets
this.
boring. It gets boring.
Yeah.
Like, look, I have an eagle from every year. It's like great. Every
Yeah,
single one of them is the same except for the numbers on the bottom.
exactly.
The other, it's amazing. I like talking to you about the private mint thing because I love that concept. And the coin that we did for this channel, I tried to put, and again, I didn't know who existed. I didn't know who was making coins back then. It was years ago, but the ideas that went into it since the beginning of this channel, I had Marsyas, the Greek satyr, as a symbol, and he spoke truth to power. He challenged the god Apollo to a musical contest. He lost, and Apollo, just for the audacity of challenging a god, strung him to a tree and then skinned him and filleted him alive. And that's that symbol of that tortured face you see on our coin. That's Marsyas. And he had the audacity to challenge the elite, the gods, and speaks truth to power. He became a representation to the Roman people who would like post petitions on him as a representation of free speech. And I felt like that was a great symbol for what we do here, what you do. And then, of course, on the reverse of my coin, I put the Amaji symbol, the first cuneiform inscription of humans ever writing the word freedom, liberty, in wedge form. It's the first time humans wrote the word
good for
libertas.
you, man.
So if you check out the back of my coin, it's libertas cuneiform, the word Amagi, which is the first time humans wrote freedom, liberty. But it's more than that. It means manumission, to be released from slavery and released from debt.
Beautiful.
And that coin it sold like 960 pieces, but you know, over a course of like 2 years, because you're saying, a very small group of people. But I was so excited to like send those messages forward and get that message to the people. They were struck by QSB, quality silver bullion, before they were sold out to Regency Mint.
I do want to applaud you in the design that you did, because that's beautiful, meaningful design that deserves, you know, a broader audience too. So
yeah, if you ever want, I'll send you a link to just the coin description, because that's the reason that all went into it, was for that very reason. You know, challenging the elite, speaking truth to power, and spreading the message of freedom, liberty. On the back in Latin, it says argentum, aurum and argentum, basically gold and silver and freedom. And just like, this is what we're trying to do. And it's a 1 ounce silver round. That's what it was. And the community loves it. There's now, because that was so long ago, people try to get more that they can't get them. There's no more. That's it. It was, you know, they stopped minting them.
My design that I released this week is kind of on the opposite side of it. It's called Fuck Your Freedom. And it's like a pissed off woman giving the finger with the banksters throwing money in the background. And it's basically how the banking community and the trillionaires are making tremendous money off of these lockdowns. And we're embracing these stupid masks mandates. And losing our freedom over this. So it's kind of like one of these signs of the times designs that, you know, again, it's only going to be available for a week. But
you mean you're not wearing your 3 masks right now?
No, can you imagine? They must be like goofing somewhere, be like, dude, they wore 1 mask. How about if they wear 2 masks?
It's unbelievable. Yeah. And it's funny. It's like, look, people, if your little monkey pus chemical vaccine is so great and works, that needle that you want to stick them on, then why are you telling me I need 3 masks now? Are you kidding me? You just injected all of these people with some chemical that you invented in a month, and now you're saying I need more masks? It's like, get away from me. Just get away. Don't even talk to me. I don't even like saying the word. You know, I don't use the word the C word about this epidemic. I didn't want to any of the words that they talk about. These are unparalleled times, unprecedented times. What is the other one they use? This is a new normal. The new normal. I don't like to
winter.
I'll say it once just for the sake of it, so everyone knows. COVID-19. I don't even like using the word. I don't like using that word. anything
like,
about
what
it.
word is he saying that he just want to use the
It's
C
that
word?
I
I know one.
I know I do exactly. It makes me cringe, Chris. It makes
Yeah.
me cringe. I can't
It, it,
stand reading articles or seeing the news or the reports because look,
it's the most interesting psyop I've ever thought of. I mean, it
it's the
is
most, it's
a
overblown.
total non-threat, and yet it got everybody.
Dude,
I mean,
George
this is
Orwell
way
could not have written about this any
no,
better. He couldn't have come up
no,
with it. He'd be like, "Now this is a little far fetched. I'm not going to write a book
no one
about
would
a
fall for
fake,
that.
yeah, a fake illness." He's like, "No one would read that. I'm going to write Animal
And
Farm
nobody's
instead."
dying.
Yeah,
Nobody's like convulsing and spitting up blood in the middle of the street.
Chris, it's incredible, dude. I mean, let's talk about it real quick. Let's break it down because even though they'll probably shadow ban me further,
When it first hit in February, I posted a video saying that Christmas was going to be canceled last February because I knew that it was happening in China, and then the whole supply chain was going to go down. But the videos that China was showing, people were dropping dead in malls. Like, that's a total psyop now. I'm like,
Yeah.
they weren't dropping dead in malls and whisking people up. They were doing it to scare the hell out of us. So by
hey,
the time
Chris,
it hit us in March,
have you looked up the flu casualties,
mm-mm,
the flu numbers
no.
for this year? Try to find them. Try to find how many people died of
Oh
influenza
yeah,
A or B.
nobody died. Yeah, we cured
Influenza A or B.
influenza.
Try to find that. Try to find tuberculosis fatalities or lung cancer fatality
Zero,
numbers. Okay. I
zero.
have a very close friend of mine who's a
Mm-hmm,
pharmacist in a major hospital.
mm-hmm,
He handled a patient who was on chemo, took care of all the guy's drugs, everything for a long time. He was given 2 weeks to live, the patient. He was going to die.
mm-hmm.
This friend of mine came into his shift one day, and the charge nurse on the floor that he was helping work on said that so and so had passed away. Da da da. My friend grabbed the chart, was just looking at it. His death, this lung cancer patient who was given 2 weeks to live and who was dying, he died of COVID. He was a
Amazing.
COVID, and he
The
raised
hospital gets a bonus.
exactly. He raised concerns
Yeah.
about it, and in so many words, I'll paraphrase. It's look, don't worry about it. We get more money. You get more money. Everyone gets paid. The insurance is kicking down. The federal government kicks down. Don't look at it. He died of COVID. Shut the hell up. And it's disgusting. And the funny thing is I know a lot of people. I've got a lot of friends that work in the medical world, and the actual, if you look at the real numbers for this supposed virus, if it is like 0.003% fatality rate
Yeah.
in the general population. It's 0.1 for the flu and actual influenza. You're talking about influenza. The flu is like 10 or 20 times more dangerous than this thing that's floating around. That I've met people that supposedly had it and they're fine. They slept it off in like a day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I think I had it in the beginning of February. I worked out one day. I didn't feel good afterwards. Next day I woke up, I was sick, and I didn't work out, and I was feverish. I drank a ton of water, vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc. And then the next morning I woke up, I felt a little bit better, and I worked out by the end of the day. So it's not like I don't know, Ebola.
Right.
But like nobody's dying like that, and then it seems like the people that are dying are over 80 and have other problems and stuff. So it's a complete psyop. The one thing I do think that it is tied to is because I think the economy did blow up last March, where remember when we had we painted a negative $45 oil price.
Yes.
And that's when all the unemployment hit and all this stuff started coming down. I think the economy did go off the cliff like a Wile E. Coyote moment in March, and all we've been doing is just printing more money to keep Wile E. Coyote from hitting the bottom. But at some point, gravity is going to kick in.
Can I throw a conspiracy your way? Because I think you'll accept it. I think you'll accept it. I think this will take root.
I love conspiracies.
Oh, well, the thing is, they're not, like Ron Paul said, is it really a conspiracy? Because a conspiracy is a group of people conspiring to do something wrong, correct? And do humans do that? That's so. It's
called Congress.
The actual term conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA to discredit people that believe in things that are actually happening, I think. But back to what I was going to tell you about, and I'm sure you've heard of this. You remember the repo markets that in the fall of 2019, was it? It was last fall, not the fall we just had, the fall of last year. So it was 2019. Okay. The fall of 2019, the repo markets, all the liquidity dried up. Banks stopped lending each other money, and it just froze up. And the Fed had to act. They had that emergency lending thing that took place that night. I think the economy broke back in that. I mean, we already know it. I mean, it died in 2007 or 8. You could put dates on it all the way through back to
Yeah, it died in
1913,
1913.
1933, 1971. The America's
Yeah.
really good at going bankrupt and defaulting time and time again. 1965, when they had to pull silver out of coinage because they couldn't afford it because of the Vietnam War. I think internationally, the economy really hit the wall. I mean, hit it hard last fall. And I think COVID was a gigantic smoke grenade to freeze the economy, stop the velocity of money, and have a lot of excuses. Because guess what? It's not like a war or a people group or a guy on Wall Street or a bank. Because in 07, 08, the people got really upset. Remember that? The Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, people were pissed off at the executives. So guess what? This time, yeah, the economy collapsed in the fall. The repo market dried up. You can read all about it. There was articles written. The evidence is there. The economy had a serious problem in the fall of 2019. And then COVID hits. And guess what? How do you blame a microbiological organism? What are you going to do? What's the public going to do?
Sins.
Yeah, the public's not going to go march on Wall Street and try to hang executives. No, because it's a microbiological. It's something you can't even see. It's a virus. You can't even really prove if it's there. There's people that disagree on different things. People like Elon Musk get 5 tests that give him different answers. 2 says he has it. 3 says he don't have it. So what's the deal? Which one do you believe? Which test do you believe? And
it's just like the war on terror.
Yes, exactly.
You mentioned freedom to fascism.
Yep.
When Aaron Russo was talking about how his time with Nicholas Rockefeller and how they would use these, boogeyman in caves as this never-ending war that they can milk the United States government, of all this trillions of dollars fighting these wars that never exist.
It's like the drug war.
Spin of it.
Anytime
the same spin. It's just another example of how they can take your freedoms, print more money, and get away with it until it runs out.
Exactly. Look at so perfect example, like you just said, when they declare war on things, they declared a war on poverty, right? Was that Johnson or LBJ that he declared the war on poverty, created the Great Society and all these things. And then you have the drug war, the war against drugs with Ronald Reagan and the DARE programs. Every time that happens, the problem seems to get worse. Poverty got worse the moment they declared a war on poverty.
Because war is profitable.
The drug situation got worse when they declared a war on drugs. They created a police state and warrantless.
No, it's more diabolical than that. No, the CIA started bringing all the drugs from
cocaine and crack.
All the Medellin cartel is all worked for the CIA.
Absolutely,
Pablo Escobar worked for the CIA. The whole drug industry, and then they take the drugs and put it into the inner cities.
Yep.
So then they got the black community spreading crack and causing all violence. Well, let's give rise to the police to go down there, and then we arm up all these guys, destroy the infrastructure of the inner cities, the families. Rip these men out of their things, put them into a police state.
Have a prison complex. Now you have the prison industry.
Complex. You got all these lawyers got new jobs. All these judges got new jobs.
Yep.
Politicians are being, saying, "Hey, let's be tough on crime." Meanwhile, they're in the back. I mean, the Clintons were in Arkansas. They were running all this stuff. So
absolutely,
we have criminal families from the Bushes, the Obamas, Clintons. Biden's a part of it, even Kamala covering up sexual pedophilia in California for the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
They're all compromised, and they're all utterly evil. They will all sell each other out. Nancy Pelosi, crime family, Newsom, Cuomo, Murphy, De Blasio. De Blasio has done more damage to Manhattan.
Wait a minute, Chris, are you
reading? De Blasio's done more. This is a good line. De Blasio's done more damage to Manhattan than Osama bin Laden could ever dream of.
Quick question. I think you'll enjoy it. Are you reading me the flight log list for Epstein's Lolita Express? all those names that you just rattled off, I think all of them flew on Epstein's jet to his private island.
Yeah. No, there's definitely a deeper. You want to go deeper conspiracy, there's definitely a satanic mob out there, whether they pose as the Illuminati or whatever, but there's definitely a group of really bad fucking people out there who pressure and buy up all these powers, and everybody's afraid of them. And
you don't like Podesta's
any of that child pedophilia stuff is beyond sick, but it's real. That's how they get these people to do unspeakable acts. They catch them, and then they're part of the gang. Once you do something unspeakable, you're part of the family, and that's what they run on. I mean, at some point, the truth is going to come out, and it's going to come out for everybody. It's not just going to be Hillary. It's going to be Trump and, all these people. They're all going to get exposed because once it's out there, the whole world's going to want to know what's going on. And that's what's been missing. There's deeper storylines that are going on even right now. When Pelosi says the enemy is within the House of Representatives, like there's stuff going on that we're not going to know about until much later. But I do know that there's some intrinsically evil, wicked people out there. I know that sexual pedophilia, the Epstein, the shakedowns, and all this other stuff that they do is vital for their secrecy. And I think once these people start getting called to task and get out, it's going to unravel a whole host of Hollywood, political, banking, CEO, religious, all these guys at the top. They're all part of the same cabal, and they're all
Truth
trying to
always
hide from
comes to light.
consequences. It's going to happen at some point, and when it does, it's going to be the single largest event in human history.
I do think ultimately there will be a judgment day, and these people, they're going to have to account for the sins that they've committed against all of humanity.
And what would bring judgment other than an absolutely awakened humanity that just got screwed over everything that they believed in, all their 401ks, their jobs, their, all that other stuff gone. And then they're going to go, oh, wait a minute. What about those guys that, sold me on, on all this? What about them? And as soon as the dollar can't buy lawyers, media people, support, all this other stuff, it's going to be every rat for themselves, and they're all going to rat each other out. And, at least that's how I think it's going to play out eventually.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You have too many egotistical and arrogant personalities playing the same game, and they will, in fact, rat each other out. And what better time than now to buy a bucket of tar and a whole lot of feathers?
Yeah. Old school. But that's how we used to treat those people. We used to get them, run them out of our cities, run them out of our villages, run them out of our towns.
Right.
So,
right.
and here's where I think we can get all doom and gloom, but there's an opportunity, I think, for people who are like-minded to really, position themselves to be around other like-minded people. So like I mentioned before, by owning physical silver, you've now put yourself in a group of people who are consciously aware and taking conscious, individual action to bringing justice to the world. This isn't, oh, let's go down and watch on Marshington, or, let's short this stock. This is a long-term life commitment to stacking physical silver as our basis and our means of judging ourselves, and also the other people that we're working with. And then having, a silver shield stack on top of it is almost kind of like the peacock on top of it, saying, hey, this is the kind of silver stacker I am. I have a lot of silver, but I don't own any Queen of England silver. I don't own any government silver. I own the real stuff. I've been in this fight a little longer than you have.
You're speaking my language there, because I've had some people on this channel, attack me in the comments after videos were posted of why is there so much anti-queen rhetoric on this channel? And I'm thinking, how could you not have anti-queen rhetoric if you truly do your research? And once you've fallen down that rabbit hole, once you've seen the truth, you can't go back from that.
Yep. That's the beautiful thing about this. They could spend trillions of dollars on, education systems and dumbing down our language and buying up all the media and politicians. But as soon as you see the truth, all that magic is worthless, and you'll never be fooled again.
There's no
never fooled again.
I've had people on this channel exactly tell me the same, that they once their eyes were opened, and once they got out of their stock positions or whatever, once they started buying precious metals and listening to the content and following the leads, because I'm not inventing anything. I'm just a medium in which a lot of this information passes through. I share articles, news, and historical information. So, hey, check this out. Once they see that, and once they're exposed to it, it's done. It's it. Once you expose people to the real truth and they see it because it's obvious and it rings true, it affects their soul and their heart. They're like, oh my goodness, they can't go back to sleep again. You're not going to, you'll always carry it with you.
And why would you want to?
Exactly.
Right? You also now, by understanding your limitations or how you got fooled, you also see the opportunities that are ahead of you. And to me, I think the opportunity with silver is nothing else out there even remotely interests me. Even when cryptos back in 2011, I said, first of all, I got pushed pretty hard back in 2011 because I put out the Silver Bullet, Silver Shield. I think I was very instrumental in getting silver to get from $27 up to $51 back in 2011 with that article. But then when JP Morgan came in and took it over, there was a big push on me personally of emails and people reaching out to me to try to get me into cryptos, specifically into Bitcoin. And I ended up talking to one of the lead programmers, Gavin Andresen, and he described his meeting with the CIA down in Langley about his involvement with Bitcoin. And the one question he said that really kind of sent him for a loop was that they asked him, they said, you know, the dual nature of Bitcoin, it can be used for good and evil. What are your thoughts on that? And he says, well, I guess all weapons or all inventions have dual use, could be used for good or bad, and it's not really for me to decide, blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, I told him, I said, no, this is specifically, you know, designed for evil. It is another digital illusion of wealth. It is a Ponzi scheme by its very nature. I said, you took something that is intrinsically worthless, you build up the perceived value of it, and you sell it for a higher perceived value to the greater fool who might sell it to somebody else. It's a Ponzi scheme. I said, I don't care if it's a $10 million Ponzi scheme or I don't know how big it got up to, an $800 billion Ponzi scheme. But I said, I'm not interested in any Ponzi scheme. So I passed on Bitcoin in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2015, all these years because it's a Ponzi scheme. Unlike silver, which is the most undervalued asset, I think silver is going to be worth more than Bitcoin by the time this is all over with, because silver has actually got, you know, uses and rare and you know, and it's going to be one of the few real seats of wealth to have when all these digital illusions go down. You know, what good is having, you know, $30,000 Bitcoin if your $30,000 Bitcoin can't get transferred through the brokerage firm because the government's, you know, got a lockdown like they're doing with these Robinhood traders, or the dollars that your Bitcoin has got sold for aren't worth anything, or the banks that, you know, you keep the dollars in, you know, are going down. I said, at the end of the day, all these digital illusions don't mean anything until you transfer it into something real in your hands. And I
Because a
said,
change,
there's
yeah.
Exactly.
very few things out there that will actually hold value. Once you get it out of the digits, what are you going to do? Buy food? You know, yeah, you could buy, you know, a couple $1,000 worth of food, but that food degrades and is, you know, you may not want to eat, you know, your 80th jar of peanut butter. And then, you know, gold to me, I think is relatively overvalued to silver because there's 3 to 6 times more gold above ground than there is silver. It doesn't do half of anything, and all the banksters own it.
Or they're
So if
both going
they
to go
can
up
justify,
together, then silver's going to go up a
yeah,
lot more than we think
yeah, and silver's just going to go up faster relative than gold, which I think is the most likely
because
scenario.
of the ratio definitely
But
has to close up.
yeah, and then the value of everything else out there relative to that silver is going to go down. So the only reason why, you know, housing prices are at bubbles high is because we have the 30-year treasury at, I don't know, 2% or whatever. You could borrow money so cheap. But once that interest rate rises globally to reflect the risk of things out there, you know, all of a sudden those houses aren't worth more, or maybe the local governments become so squeezed for tax revenue that they keep raising the property taxes on it. So even keeping your money in real estate's not really a safe place to be, and it's certainly not liquid, certainly not something that you can just pick up and move. And I think silver is going to, you know, really hit so many different ways of like, oh, thank God I own silver,
Oh man,
and
and you
that's
know,
why
a
I only own
change.
silver. I don't.
Well,
I own 1 ounce of gold.
you're prepared, Chris, for the monumental shift, a major change that's on its way. And
Yep.
I
Yep.
received a message from one of our subscribers earlier today, and I haven't dove completely into it yet, but I think you'll kind of get what he's getting at here. He said, "Hey, Junius, check out the Zero Hedge article. Some mystery guest booked all 466 rooms at an iconic Fairmont hotel in Jasper Park Lodge, Alberta, for 65 days, starting the 23rd of February. It's a 700-acre site. No one is confirming or denying a film set, suggestion, or rumor. Some people think it could be like round two of a Bretton Woods or a Jekyll Island type meeting rolled into one, some type of a international banking. I mean, it sounds plausible. And apparently Zero Hedge did an article on that, but that's the kind of thing that is, I mean, these people might be having a meeting about the breakdown and what's taking place or trying to do some, and again, because we're not the ones really in control. The only way we can get that control is by holding the silver, but then we have to be able to defend it. And I think there's a component to this of the people not complying anymore and not really subscribing to the rules that the elites have in place that are which really an illusion. The obedience has to be, people need to get to the point where they are willing to disobey the state. And how far are people willing to go to do that? if they pass new rules, new laws. Hey, turn in your silver, Chris. We know you have some. Turn it in.
What silver?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing about silver. It can go away for generations. It can get lost. It can get found, and that's what they don't like about it. They know that, and it's not something to play light with, because to me, that's every man should have the right of being able to protect their own wealth, and especially against the inflation tax that is running by all these criminal guys. So yeah, I don't think they're ever going to come for physical silver. The whole notion, I've done multiple videos talking about how silver confiscations is ridiculous, even from a tactical perspective. Being in the infantry and Marines doing mount training in
Yeah.
Quantico, Virginia, military operations in urban terrain, that you would need multiple men just to go to go snatch and grab, where there's probably going to be a guy with a gun on the other side of it that doesn't want to give it up to, for silver that may or may not be there. It's a complete
Right.
impossibility.
Exactly. I completely
And
agree with you. It would be
yeah,
a logistical impossibility, but also the armed
and what
population of just the United States alone and myself, because
yeah,
most people who
and what
own
would they
silver own guns.
yeah. And so if there is ever going to be a confiscation, and I've passed this out, I said the United States Treasury should confiscate from J.P. Morgan for all the criminal silver manipulation. They have 140 million ounces of silver there. They can mint off a half ounce for everybody, and they give it all out to the American people. But other than that, the silver ETF. I mean, how many people do they have claiming on top of that? I don't even know if there's physical silver there. There's not enough to go around, and it exposes them at the most weakest point. Let's say they confiscated all the silver in the world. That's $25 billion. They spend that in 3 hours in Washington. Like, it's
Yeah.
still not enough for
It's
them. So
$27
it's
billion a day are being pumped into the financial system to the banks as a life
yeah,
stream from the Fed.
yeah,
27
and
billion a day.
that's if they got everything, and they can't. So they're going to have to deal with their own digital illusions. They'll continue to print it out. There's no way that it's going to, a confiscation of any means is going to happen. Even when they quote unquote confiscated in 1933, they sent it out this order for people to voluntarily turn in their $20 an ounce silver for a $20 gold certificate. So they got equal exchange. It wasn't like the United States government came in and said, give us all your gold, or we'll put a gun to your head. No, they gave them $20 a gold certificate to then go spend out there. The real crime happened when they revalued that silver to $42, and raised it up 87% overnight. Then those people who still had the $20 gold certificate realize now that their $42 gold was worth a lot more than the $20 certificate they got. And that was the devaluation. That was the crime. That's what actually ended up happening. So
And not a lot of
I don't
people
even think
complied. A lot of
now that,
people didn't comply with that. There was only, I think, one
of
or two
course not.
prosecutions. Only one guy that like picked some farmer out of Illinois. They prosecuted
Yeah.
him, but no one. That's why there's so many pre-33 gold that still exist. It's because no one
Yep.
turned it in.
Yeah.
You just don't comply. You don't obey. You have to
Yep.
just get to a point where you're
And I
not
have a whole series on my Silver Shield thing called Disobey, and
good.
it's talked about all these people, Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Alexander Solzhenitsyn and a whole bunch of other people in there, and it's all about what did they do? How did they become important? They disobeyed. They didn't follow along with the crowd. They said, no, this is wrong, morally, imperatively wrong. I'm not playing along anymore, and I'm going to encourage everybody else to do the same thing. The wonderful thing I think that I offer with the Silver Shield thing is, unlike all those million man movements or Gandhi and stuff, this is I'm selling the ticket that that's going to make everybody wealthy on the other side. Like, as soon as you buy an ounce of silver, not only are you supporting the effort, but it's also, when this all does happen, that's what's going to be worth a lot more. So you have it all encased with all this knowledge, encoded. I've encoded a lot of like really powerful magic inside of a lot of them. For the rest of this stuff, it's really about a conscious individual solution that everybody participates in, and we all help each other out, because when we raise the value of silver, we're raising up the best people that I know. If you game stock this, it seems like these guys are going to go out and go buy Lamborghinis and go off to Vegas for a weekend. But for the silver people, if we raise the value of silver up where it can no longer be manipulated by the banksters anymore, and we actually have real price discovery of where maybe $500, $900 an ounce silver, and it never goes back, because those people who own all the silver at 15, 25, 30, all these other things. They didn't want your crappy dollars when it was $25 silver. They're certainly not going to want it now when it's $900 silver.
Exactly. I like that. I think that's where we could leave off, is they're not going to want your dollars at all.
I did want to just leave a couple websites for you guys to look up later. The most important one is probably silvershieldguide.com. It's not, I don't own the site, but one of my subscribers did a Herculean effort of categorizing all the 500 designs. So he does that over at silvershieldguide.com. That's probably the most important place for people to start. Because I think if they just see, a couple coins over at goldenstatemint.com, they'll be like, okay, that's cool. But once you see the whole story in the last 10 years and the hundreds of designs and, the valuations that they're all reaching now and the place in history, I think that's even a more important thing.
Right.
My YouTube channel is the Greatest Truth Never Told over at YouTube. I've been this close of being banned. I feel very fortunate that I still have a channel, but clearly you're not allowed to speak about a lot of the things that you and I would want to speak about. So I try to just stick to silver. And then, and then for my coins, every week I release a new design over at goldenstatemint.com. If you look under collection section and then down to Silver Shield, you can see, I have 10-ounce bars. My favorite, we just released this, is called No Lie Gets to the Other Side. It's a big fat 10-ounce bar and it looks pretty cool. So go take a look at that.
Awesome. Thank you. And by the time this is uploaded, all of those links that you mentioned will be in the video description below.
I saw all of the list of all of your coins on silvershieldguide.com, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's big. And I think we're still so small. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, I have a few hundred people that have supported this over the last, 10 years. And there's billions of people out there. Like, the upside potential of Silver Shield to me is like way higher than just owning a physical ounce of silver, because there's a huge story behind it. I would like to turn it into more of a movement where people are more coalesced around, having silver as our primary, valuation, and then using that valuation to create a better world out there that's not, in this digital illusion world that we have now.
Oh, I imagine. And hey, you mentioned in the beginning of the video that it's hard. It's hard to keep up with others who are in the same movement. And I can understand that. It's the creator burnout that a lot of us experience. And it's so important that in the stacking or the precious metals or the silver community that we support each other. And that's why it's been such an honor to have you on here today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here on the Junius Maltby channel.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and good night.